Are you an introvert navigating the corporate world and wondering how to thrive without pretending to be someone you're not? In this episode, I'm joined by three incredible women, again, each bringing their own insights and experience on what it looks like to truly succeed as an introvert in the workplace. Ogochukwu is an HR executive, Crystal is an IT program analyst, and Faintolu is a tech executive. Together, we explore the highs and lows of corporate life, what it means to speak up, set boundaries, and stay true to who you are, while also growing, leading, and making an impact. If you're an introvert trying to find your rhythm at work, you'll find both strategy and soul in this episode. Let's go. For me, as a young woman going into corporate, I already knew that corporate was not for me. I already knew. I don't know how, but I just knew, right? So it was really hard for me. And you talk about, Crystal, your first job being all nervous. That was me. I was a nervous wreck. And it was funny because even what I was doing was so basic, but I was so afraid. I was so nervous and very shy, and I didn't have much confidence and all of that. So when I think about it now, it took a while for me to figure out how do I fit in and where do I fit in corporate. At the end of the day, I didn't really fit in, but I was able to at least grow in some of the, jobs that I did. So knowing what you know now, right, and how long you've been in corporate, how would you encourage a young woman who is introverted, who may be shy, she's walking to a first job, and trying to figure out, okay, I'm in this new space. What do I do? How do I show up? How do I engage? How would you encourage her? I'll start with Faintul.
I had a feeling you were going to start with me. Okay. I would say, first off, I think Crystal mentioned something earlier about giving yourself grace. I feel like that's something that a lot of times we are not too quick to offer to ourselves grace. Like, give yourself grace to grow, give yourself grace to learn. Like, if you're at the table, then you belong there, right? There, and you bring value there, right? I think I would also encourage a young woman or man to bet on themselves. I'll tell them, bet on yourself. Like, no one else is going to, if you're not willing to, bet on yourself. Like, what's the worst that would happen? I know that being an introvert, a lot of times we're also very cognizant of how people perceive us or how people react to what we do or say. And we're trying to be careful with that. But even if perceptions change, even if you start off on the wrong foot, right? It's better you do that and you change that perception than you do nothing at all and you're just in frozen ghost mode. You're not, trying at all, right? I would say there's this saying from, I think it was a Cinderella story. The father was telling her, do not let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game, right? Do not let the fear of saying something wrong, being misinterpreted, being misunderstood, keep you from, speaking up for yourself. And OG mentioned earlier, be prepared for anything that you think would take you out of your comfort zone, right? If you've prepared for the best and worst case scenario, if you know your onions and you're not afraid to ask questions, because guess what? Nobody expects you to know everything. And don't be afraid to say, I don't know, right? If you've done your due diligence, prepared, brought your best self to work, also mentally prepared. If you've done everything that you know you can do, if you've controlled all the controllables, then I would say give it your best shot and don't be afraid. Even if it takes time, you can always come back and give that feedback. But one thing I have learned is sometimes I'm afraid to say something, and then someone else says the same thing and everybody's like, yes, that is it. That is exactly what we need. And I'm like, oh my God, I should have said that, right?
Yeah.
So it's better you say something and you have a 50-50 chance of saying the right thing or saying the wrong thing and being corrected and learning through that experience, than for you to just not say anything at all and then you regret it later, right? So I think that would be my recommendation. Speak up for yourself, bet on yourself, give yourself grace, and you've got this. And we're rooting for you too.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. I love that. Just giving yourself the chance to try it, even if you're going to fail. I think a lot of times we're afraid to be wrong. We don't want people to see us as, at least personally, let me not generalize this. This I know is one of my weaknesses that I've been working very hard to figure out. I don't want people to see me as wrong, as somehow I'm not correct, or I don't have it together. I don't know what I'm talking about. And for a long time, I remember even, I feel like every writer, every creative person will go through this experience where you do your work, you present your work to someone. It doesn't matter what it is, if it's writing, if it's art or whatever, and they have their opinion, or they have their whatever objective or subjective, whatever opinions on your work. And you get defensive because you're like, no, you don't get it. No, that's not the point. No, this. And I used to feel like that because I remember when I first started writing online, and somebody gave me a very scathing review. And she was like, you string words together, but they don't make sense. And I was like, I was ready to punch somebody. Like, what do you mean? But I feel like we need to get to that point where it doesn't faze you. You're like, okay, I'm going to take that and I'm going to see, does this make sense to me for where I am, for where I'm going? And it's like, if it doesn't, then throw it out and then keep moving. But being able to be comfortable with being wrong, right? I think it's one very crucial thing that will help a lot of us introverts to not be so nervous about showing up and just, speaking up and saying what we can, even if, we might be wrong. So I definitely like that. Thank you for sharing that. Crystal?
Remy, you just made me think of something. I've been on calls where people will give out the wrong information confident.
Yes.
So why we question ourselves if, try, give it a try. And if it's wrong, like someone said, you'll learn from it, as opposed to who is confidently giving out the wrong
wrong information.
Like, give yourself the space to put out a suggestion, put out an idea, or preface what you have to say with, I'm not 100% sure that this is going to work, but here is my idea. But if I could go back and even tell my younger self or tell someone who is new to work, I would tell them, you have to affirm yourself daily. You have to remember, because I have to bring up faith. You have to remember who God says you are. And when we do that, we can do things in His strength and not our own. And for me, the big thing is giving myself grace, because I can think about so many situations, especially early on in my career, where I talked myself out of putting in for jobs because I didn't want to in, or I didn't speak up. I didn't want to be wrong. No, we are wired the way that we are, but you still have to try, and we can't use it as an excuse or a crutch. We have to be willing to stretch. And oftentimes that means stretching our faith and saying, God, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to work on this project, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be successful.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Thank you for that, Crystal. Olga?
The things that I would say are things that I wish someone had said to me when I started out. So that's how I'm thinking about this, and I've written a few things down as the introvert that I am.
Yes.
The first thing is, what Crystal had said, and there's no way that I can say this without going back to the Bible and saying that I would, remind myself, the younger version of me that, it's Ephesians chapter 2. That's my anchor scripture. Just having an anchor scripture that reminds you of who you are, the workmanship, the masterpiece that God has created. He didn't make a mistake when He made you the way you were. And even for me, having changed, like having my personality changed over time, is not even something that God was not aware of. He knew that I would go through this journey. So who better to stay with and stick with than Him? So that's the first thing I would say. Just a constant reminder, asserting yourself of who you are in God. And then the second thing I would say would be, to value your strengths. Being an introvert, you have strengths that are needed in the corporate world just as well as the next extrovert. You listen, you are introspective, you bring a different flavor to the table. It's a strength, so value it. It's a uniqueness about you, and don't feel like it's a weakness. These are strengths that you have, and hold on to it. The third thing would be to find a mentor, seek out a mentor. Of course, it's not something that you rush through, but you intentionally and carefully seek out a person who can end up being an ally for you in the workplace, or someone who can speak up for you in the room, someone who gets you, in a way that others might not necessarily get you. But the person, would definitely matter, in the grander scheme of things. So having a mentor would be a great thing. Set your boundaries, because you will be stressed, because you will need to recharge. You will be tired of having people in your face. So know yourself enough to know when you need to withdraw, when you need to step back. I always say that I'm grateful that I work in a place where it's hybrid working. So when it's a lot and you need to step back, you have a chance to just, kind of step away from it. So make sure that you're doing things to recharge your battery so that you show up constantly at the most optimal version of yourself. And then, of course, the last thing would be, and this is something that you're either able to work out yourself or maybe not. So you get into a job that is not necessarily playing to your extroversion or your extroverted personality. Are there things that you can do within the organization that shows that strength? Maybe you like to read up stuff, you like to research things. Find something that you can do. Is there a project you can latch onto that will utilize that strength? Maybe your preference is in written communication versus speaking in large groups. Is there something you can work on within the organization that showcases that strength? Just so that, you're putting yourself out there in a way that gives you confidence, but also shows other sides of you that your introversion enhances. And what else did I write? I think that's it. Those are the things that I'd written down when I thought about this, to say, if someone had told me some of these things earlier, would have really helped.
Yeah, I love that. It is true. It is true. If we are able to find very specific guidance that speaks to where we are, and it's sad that a lot of us didn't have that, and hopefully we can be that for other people. Hopefully we can encourage other people to know how to step into those spaces, because the truth is very few people are prepared for the workplace when they're coming out of college. Very few people. We're not. True. And of course, we can never be completely prepared, right? That's life. You walk into life transitions. Nobody prepares you to be a parent. No matter how many books you read, right? You still have to learn on the go. But
no matter how many people's babies you take care of, by the way, on that example.
I know. No matter how many you babysit, you're never prepared. So I think but having just a basic idea of how to show up, how to know your strengths. There's this and this is not an ad or anything for them, but I came across Career Direct. It's like an online career test kind of thing that you answer some questions and it kind of gives you the different, your personality and how it kind of fits into different career options for you. And I think those kind of tools are helpful for young people to begin to figure out, okay, what are my strengths and how can I best use them before they get into maybe even college, before they figure out what am I going to study, so you don't spend 4 years studying something you never, it's a good experience, but come on, if we can be more targeted at that time before we start, I think it'll be helpful. So thank you for all of those insights. Being prepared, affirming yourself, valuing your strengths, finding a mentor, finding time to recharge. And that is a big deal, because sometimes how people feel like, oh, introverts are so quiet. If we're not in a space where we feel rested and we are, recharged and optimally whatever in that space where we can thrive, we have the potential to not be so nice, not be so great to be around, so having finding time to recharge is very important, and also using your strengths. And you mentioned something that I want to come back to, is looking for different ways, even maybe in your current organization, where you can use your strengths. It might be outside of your core responsibilities, but something you can do that will actually use your strengths. And I think that's something that we don't think about most of the time. For me, I definitely have an experience about this, even though it had to do with my core work, but I had to find a way to do something else in the company I was working for, because what I was doing, I didn't like it. Frankly, I hated it. Analytics and social media, I didn't like all of that, but I wanted something else. And I figured out, I love design, and maybe I should figure out how to do this. And I didn't think proactively until an opportunity arose for me to do that. I'm like, I think I'll prefer to do that than all of this other stuff that I don't really enjoy. And then, I started to do that, but I was doing it alongside all the things I didn't enjoy. So it was like doubling my responsibilities at the same pay level. But I was willing to do that because I knew that at least this part of it gave me life. It fueled my strengths in a way that felt more, energizing for me, and I think we don't think a lot about that, but that's very useful. And that kind of leads me to the next question that I have for you guys is, I'm not sure if the employers that you've worked with have a kind of space which they create for employees for specific growth opportunities for different personalities and the way people show up. I don't know if that's a thing where you've worked, but I'm curious, what do you think employers should know about how the impact of personality and strengths really affect work? Or does it even matter? Because I know that some people might feel like that's not something we want to optimize for. Like, no one cares, just do your job. No one cares if you're this or that. I wonder what you think about this. Is it possible for employers to maybe create programs or environments or whatever that really helps people thrive, based on how they show up best, the kind of work they do best because of their personality? I'm curious what you think. Let me start with Intolu.
Here I was hoping you would start with OG. Can we start with OG? Because she's in HR. Can we start with OG so we can get some of the professional?
We can absolutely do that. So do you want to
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think I haven't necessarily worked in a place where there's a specific program for people with certain personalities. I don't know if it's a thing or if it's a thing that, if it's a place that the world will get to at some point. But I think that employers know in general the benefits of having teams that are made up of diverse personalities. Like if you ask people to speak about it, they can tell you all the theory of it, which is, there's more creativity, you have, different flavors and varieties. But I think that sometimes when it comes down to it, when it comes down to the pressure in the workplace, when it comes down to getting work done, sometimes, and I use that word, I don't use that word lightly, sometimes all of that gets thrown out of the window. You are then expected to show up in a certain way. You are then expected to put in the work yourself without the organization necessarily investing in you or in your personality. However, one thing that I think can help, because you know how they say people don't leave companies, they leave managers. There's a lot that rides on the back of a manager, of a line manager or a team manager. One thing that I think can help is, trainings for line managers to know how to manage the people with this kind of personality that are in their teams. Because once they get it and once the line manager understands it, that this person is not necessarily weak, they're not necessarily disengaged, they're not necessarily out of touch, they're just a different type of person, and they're going away and coming back with all these bright ideas. So asking them the right questions, even after the meeting, and saying, I know you would not normally have spoken up in this meeting, so do you want to come back and speak to me later, about what you think? Or creating that kind of comfortable environment where the person feels safe and where they feel like they can trust, versus you never speak up in meetings and you seem so disengaged. So therefore a role came up and I didn't think that you were good for it. So that's one. Two would be, so one is on the line manager side. The second thing would be investing in personality type trainings for teams so people understand. So beyond the line managers, if I work in a team, if I'm a highly extroverted person, I work in a team and there's two other introverts, I'll get frustrated all the time. But certain personality tests, whether it's a DISC test or whether it is Enneagram test, where people within the same teams understand the people that they work with, it gives, all the different personalities a chance to thrive because I understand you. So I know, oh, Remy's not speaking. It's not because she's upset that I said something that she wanted to say. She's not speaking because right now she doesn't want to speak. That's just how she shows up. Because we've gone through a test as a team together and we've sat together to understand each other's results and say, oh, this is why you are the way you are. Oh, that's why you are this way. Then there's better synergy within the team. People within the teams can have each other's back. I mean, I'm painting an ideal scenario because there'll always be
yes,
those people. But people within the teams can have each other's back, can show up on behalf of, the person who is not necessarily, that out in your face type of person. So in general, those are the two things that I feel like if companies or if corporate organizations took these two things quite seriously, it would make a difference. If the line managers are getting trained and understanding what it is like to have introverts in their teams or to manage introverts, and if the teams themselves get it, I understand why you are the way you are. It won't be difficult for me to, even in my team, say, listen, I know we're supposed to hang out today after work, but this is the third time in a row, and I kind of need to step back. There will be no need for animosity or, oh my gosh, she's so stuck up or whatever. They'll get it and they'll be like, yeah, she needs her time off. It's okay. And they'll check on you the next morning to say, I hope you're feeling refreshed or whatever.
I love that.
Because they get it. But if they don't, then it's like friction, or she never wants to hang out, or she likes to have lunch by herself. Personally, there are times I want to have lunch by myself. And it's not because I don't want to sit and talk to you, but I just want to have lunch by myself just because. And I'm not doing anything. I just want to have lunch by myself. But if people get you, they know, they're like, okay, one of those days, and it's okay. And so again, those are the two things that I would put on the table as an immediate start.
I love those. And I like that you said in an ideal environment, this is, what the results of this test and knowing each other's personalities would be. Well, of course, we know that the world is not ideal. And already I know a lot of people kind of they don't feel very comfortable with this test, especially in a work setting, even employees. Because they feel like it will be used against me. If all of this is like, okay, this is why you do this is why you do that. I mean, I don't have any answers for that. I just, like you said, do wish that the world could be an ideal environment, because it'll be helpful for everyone to look at, assume positive intent. She's doing this because, this is how she shows up, and that makes sense. So thanks for that.
Of course. And just to add on that, I mean, it's not like once you've done a test within a team, is good to go. I think there are things that come into the mix of having created previously a safe space for people to feel comfortable enough, because of course people know what those results mean, and sometimes they'll just answer what they think should be the end result, and it ends up not showing the real personality. So just like the results are skewed, and it's okay. I don't want people to really know that this is who I really am, because they don't feel safe enough. So of course, as the organization should have already provided that space where people feel safe enough to let their guards down and to show up. We say it a lot, is corporate speak, be authentic, show up as your authentic self. But when you really do show up as your authentic self, it's like, who is this person? And you don't fit here. Exactly. You don't fit. Why are you here? So, walking the walk, and talking the talk will lead up to this point of this.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Crystal?
Yeah, I think just thinking about where I work in the different environments I've worked in, it would take a real culture change. Just us having this conversation, I'm going to go back to work and tell them that this is something that we should talk about, because it's not talked about. So I think having more conversations will highlight the fact that if someone is less prone to speak up in a meeting, it doesn't mean that they're incompetent. It doesn't mean that they don't bring value to the team. Yeah. But if the perception is that if you're not talking enough, if that automatically means that you're not contributing. Well, there has to be a culture change to get people on the same board. And so I think things like personality assessments are valuable if you use it and it helps to reshape culture. And I think that is, just after having this conversation, that is very much needed where I work.
Yeah, thank you for that. Faintola?
Yeah, great points. Agree 100%. If we're in an ideal world, yes, we would have all of this great stuff. But I think one other thing that I personally will add would be like, say, a reverse mentorship program. Like if there's an extroverted C-suite executive or manager being paired with like an introverted mentee, for example, just so they get to rub off of each other. And then the extroverted manager or leader gets to understand things from the introverted person, empathize more, and potentially even learn how to manage, other introverted people on their team moving forward. And then the introvert person as well also learns from this, say, extroverted leader, and, understand how they process things as well, and potentially maybe learn a thing or two that would, help them, be a nicer blend. Because to be honest, we all know that right now, what we have in the workforce, at least for most of the places I've worked, is not the ideal workforce where, every, the result or the outcome is tied to your performance. A lot of times it's also tied to a lot of politicking. It's tied to you being vocal, being in the right place at the right time, being visible to the leadership, for example. And based on that, it's kind of skewed to favor people that are more outspoken, that are more extroverted. So just to maybe balance the scale a little more, I feel like that reverse mentorship program might be helpful. Another thing that I think would be helpful, I personally think it would be nice to see more, introverted leaders, right? How do they present in meetings, like having an introverted president, and not president of like POTUS, but like president of a company, president, or vice president. Like, how do they present? Because sometimes seeing those things can also be like positive reinforcement to the introverted person to actually realize that, oh, okay, like I am on track. This is where I am. This is the knowledge gap. These are things that I can embody, and this can actually get me to where I want to be. I feel like having that is also something that would be helpful helpful. Of course, we don't have control over that, but I
Yeah.
personally feel like seeing more leaders that are introverted, and not necessarily, I feel like most of the introverted leaders I've seen are being like very technical, because a lot of times they're individual contributors, right? And their technical expertise gets them there. But okay, let me throw this question to you. Would you say being vocal makes a better leader than someone that embodies everything but is not as vocal? What would you say based on what we have in society now? What's your perception of a good leader? Someone that is well spoken, eloquent, coherent, versus someone that takes his time but embodies everything that makes a leader.
Yeah, I'll let everyone else also talk to this, but let me just I think if we look at it from a perspective of what is our perception, right? As people, just the way we are, without maybe any deeper level of self-awareness, any deeper level of understanding of this, it's very easy to say, of course, the better leader is the person who is charismatic, who is vocal, who is there leading the team, and you can see them, people flock around them, listen to them. They're almost like orators when they talk, everybody's like listening, and, it's easy to think that is the perception of what an ideal leader should be. But of course, we know that's not true. There are leaders like
100%.
that, who are so charismatic, but they are terrible people
100%.
persons. So how do so it doesn't really matter if it's not really about how you present in the sense of talking and being vocal and being out there. I think it's definitely more than that. And to your point about really seeing more introverted people in leadership, I feel like because people who are introverted, who have risen through the ranks to a certain, maybe to the CEO of a company, a chairman or president or whatever, I feel like most of them have had to fake being more extroverted. That's why
100%.
we don't even know. Because sometimes you'll be like, somebody will tell you, maybe in an interview, and they were like, oh, I'm an introvert. And you're like, what? You are not an introvert, right? Because you never saw them like that, because they had to really step out, very aggressively step out of their introverted nature to thrive in those spaces. So that's why sometimes we don't get it, because there's a pastor in my church who is very charismatic. Like, he speaks so well. And even outside of church settings, he leads organizations, he's like a coach, he's a motivational speaker, and is always going all around doing all of this stuff, even outside of the church. And the day he mentioned, as an introvert, I'm like, come on, like, don't lie to us. You're not an introvert. And he's like, he's an introvert. And you would never know, because we think of the introverted person as one kind of person, but really that's not true. So I'll let someone else speak to that.
Yeah, as you all were speaking, I was just thinking about the fact that an introvert is more than one thing. So
yes,
an introvert can be organized, can be vision led. We're not all one thing. And so I think, the perception tends to lead toward, if you're more charismatic, if you talk more, then you're a better leader. But really, when you think about it, because an introvert is not just one thing, an introvert can do it too.
Yeah.
And someone mentioned this earlier about having people who advocate for you. When I look at people in my own organization who are a bit more introverted, because I know them more on a personal level, it's because someone advocated for them. Pretty sure someone else said, no, don't give them the promotion, don't give them the project. But there was someone also in the room who said, no, this person is fully capable of executing mission. So I think we show, as introverts, we show people over time that we are more than capable. And having someone in the room who speaks up for us is vital. And I think that's how a lot of introverts probably get into leadership roles, because they know they can do the job.
Yeah, I love that perspective.
And just to add on top of it, I think and when Fentolu was talking about, having introverts, first of all, I want to say that what you're doing, Remy, as this space with She Packed and introverted women is amazing. It's awesome. And it's the kind of conversations that should be happening, and the kind of platforms that should be coming up more. Because if we're saying that we're not hearing about it, no one is talking about it. The introverts themselves are not speaking about it, because they're just like in their own corners talking about it. And the people who would naturally speak up about it, they don't care about whether you're an introvert and you're speaking up. So I just wanted to say, to use this chance, because I don't know if I've ever done that, to say well done and thank you for for doing this and for living through this vision in your heart. So I think that what would then differentiate the introverts who are trying to be more, or who are ambitious, is this thing that we're saying about introverts, like your pastor, is being able to step out of your comfort zone and saying, I can do this too because I want to do this too. I want to do this. I want to be this. How can I do it? How can I step out of my comfort zone? How can I become this type of person? So it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be comfortable, and it's not going to just be thrown in our laps because this is not how we will naturally show up. So we will need to push through. We will need to break certain barriers or certain mindsets or even certain ways that people think that we are to be able to get to that point. I just wanted to add that context because there are leaders, definitely leaders in the workplace who are, introverts, and some, if you're close to, you can tell.
Yeah.
But you will also know that these people, you either see the kind of work ethic that they have or the kind of ambition that they show and how they show it. Sometimes they're not necessarily the ones who are playing the politics of the game, but they know how to embody a personality when they need to embody it. And it's not about being fake. It's about saying, this is what I need for now, for this level of where I'm going to. And the way I am today will not take me there. So I need to figure out. And sometimes I feel like it's a skill, just the same way you learn how to design stuff or you learn how to do this or that. You can also learn how to present in a way that is what your organization is looking for at that particular point in time.
I love that. Gosh, I love that you mentioned that. Yeah, Faint, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I like how we put it, particularly what Olga said about understanding what the needs are and learning to embody that. I was thinking about this book by Tim LaHaye, the Why You Act the Way You Do, where he talks about like different temperaments. And then, he gives examples of, disciples that embodied those temperaments. And then he went on to talk about, even though we have our innate, personalities, our innate temperaments, we can actually get what we call the spirit-controlled temperament, which is when you are able to embody whichever temperament suits the situation, right? You're an introvert, but the time comes when you have to make a presentation or like speak to thousands of people or negotiate a badass deal, and you're able to step up and embody that, the choleric or the extroverted personality to get what is needed at that point in time. So I think a lot of it also involves us relying on like the Holy Spirit to help us be who we need to be per time, right? I think it was the same Peter that, denied Jesus a number of times, right? Is the same one that came, boldly to proclaim Jesus, without any, fear. The same Moses that was a stammerer was, empowered to stand before Pharaoh and speak and advocate for the Israelites. So I feel like we have the Holy Spirit to empower us to be who we need to be per time, and relying on him more is definitely going to put us in a better position to be who he needs us to be per time without necessarily being inauthentic to ourselves.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Do you know that some of the things you've mentioned here, I'm sure people probably may not recognize these words. You talked about sanguine and choleric. And in the last episode of the podcast, well, I shouldn't say last because we're recording this way out of line, but in episode 7, I think I talked about personality. And if you haven't listened to it, please listen to it, because all of the things that you mentioned here, I talked about it there in the sense of the spirit control temper, because I read that book growing up, and it was the sanguine, the choleric, the melancholy, and the phlegmatic, right? And I remember growing up then, because we're 4 kids in my house, we had each one of those personalities. Like I was the melancholy. My brother was a sanguine, and my 2 sisters were phlegmatic and choleric. And I love that. Perspective of the spirit-controlled temperament, because I think it helps us not to wallow in whatever we feel are the disadvantages or the insecurities of our personality. Because definitely for me, my experience before I really learned to lean into trusting God and to receive grace for the things I know that I am graced to do, but I also want to do them. Like I have dreams. I know like you all have here. You have dreams and goals. You're driven, and hopefully we're faith driven, not just driven by whatever it is in the world, but we're driven. We want to do things. We have a mission. We know that God has a purpose for our lives and we want to work towards that. But for me, I was always afraid this is not something I would have thought of myself doing in a million years, like many years ago. Like I just didn't have the confidence. I didn't have the whatever it is that you needed to be to really speak and I didn't have that. But it took time and a lot of, ups and downs, a lot of trial and error, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of this and that. But, I came to realize that I have what it takes by the Spirit of God. I can do this, if I really put myself to doing it. So thank you guys for just all of the wonderful insights that you've provided today. I'm really grateful. And I know that's going to be helpful to anyone listening in their journeys as well. Let me ask you a final question. What are you looking forward to in future as far as your career is concerned? If you have dreams that you want to share, that's fine. If you don't want to share specifics, that's fine. You can make it general, but I just want to get a feel for what are you excited about as far as your career in the future? I'll start with Crystal.
So I have found my sweet spot in IT project management. My younger self is very proud because I now get on calls. And
I love it.
I've just grown to be more confident. So this is my sweet spot, and I eventually want to be a project manager. And outside of that, of course, I will always be writing because that's just what I do.
I know.
But yeah, management is my sweet spot, and that's where I want to go.
I love it. And everybody, please check out Crystal's website. I'm going to leave the link in the show notes. She has books, she has articles and writings and very inspiring stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to all that God has in store for you, Crystal. Thank you.
Okay. So for me, I'm looking forward to a couple of things, get promoted. In the next couple of years, I see myself moving at least like 3 steps ahead of where I am right now. I see myself, even outside my career, I feel like holistically, I am very passionate about like helping, mentoring people and also like helping like marginalized communities. So I see myself being more involved in that space. And for me to be more involved in that space, of course, I have to have a lot of money, or funding. So I see myself, growing and scaling so I can, also scale, some of those projects. Also see myself, excited to like travel the world, see the world, start a family. That's not career.
It's all part of it. It's fine.
Crop it out.
I will not. All part of it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm very excited about the future. I'm very thankful to be on this platform. So again, I know Audrey said it earlier, but thank you for having us. I'm very, excited about the future and the future of this platform for you as well.
Thank you so much. As you just mentioned, really about mentorship, something just floated into my mind. It's part of the things that I've dreamt about, for ShePact and the things we're doing, but really having a mentorship program where young people can get matched, with experienced women like you who can just provide some insight. I mean, not to like take up so much of your time, but just whatever time you're able to give to really mentor people and, pour into them, that'd be amazing. So hopefully, maybe I'll be reaching out to you soon. All right, Olga.
So basically, yeah, there are a couple of things I have which I cannot share, but in general, just continuing to develop myself as an expert in the field, putting myself out there more, just being a little bit more public about, what I share and how I kind of show up. Mentoring or mentorship is also definitely something that I am passionate about, and I do on a low key, just informally, but seeking opportunities to do this in a more formal type of manner is definitely something that I'm looking forward to. I'm passionate about young girls and, helping, supporting, especially just like Fentolo said, from marginalized communities. And I've been part of this in just little spots or buckets, but just looking forward to how I can consolidate that into scale, so to speak. And yeah, being a better mom and showing up, in the home as who God has called me to be.
I love it.
I should also chip in, like, OG is one of the most low-key, successful C-suite executives that I know. I feel like a lot of people do not know. A lot of people do not know the powerhouse that OG is. And she just like keeps her low-key profile somewhere, and I'm like, oh my God, I wish people could actually see more of OG. So I'm very glad that you're putting yourself out there some more. I would be happy to also facilitate that. I'll gladly nominate you if I have any opportunity.
I love it. Thank you so very much, ladies. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. And
you.
I look forward to all the wonderful things that the Lord will do through you and in you with your platforms, with your work, and all the ideas that you have for the future.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy this conversation, please take a moment to follow or subscribe to the podcast. I'd also love your feedback on this episode. You can scroll down on your app and click write a review. I'd love to read your takeaways from this conversation. As always, don't forget to take courage, trust God, and go pursue your big ideas. See you next time.